Because of my scars, stepmom requested that I not be in the wedding photos. After I told my dad everything, he decided not to go. Her daughter contacts her months later with startling new information on my stepmom's history. Since my stepmother Kayla, 34F, began dating my dad, 42M, 3 years ago, we have had a turbulent relationship. I, 17F, am Kayla's stepmother. I must rewind a little in order to fully comprehend the situation. When I was 8 years old, my mother passed away from breast cancer. Our whole family suffered greatly throughout the protracted and agonizing conflict. I recollect spending several evenings in hospital waiting areas, observing my mother's gradual decline, and upon her eventual demise, it seemed as though everything had crumbled. After my mother passed away, my dad and I were by ourselves for a considerable amount of time. Those early years, we relied a lot on one another. In an attempt to cope, Dad poured himself into his work and frequently put in long hours at his construction company. However, he always made sure to support me when I needed it. He would assist me with my assignments, participate in every school function, and even pick up hair braiding. Even still, his initial tries were very hilarious. We grew closer as I approached my adolescence. We created small customs, such as monthly movie marathons and pancake breakfasts on Sunday mornings. Dad turned into my closest buddy, as well as my parent. He was my go-to confidant, my solace throughout my first loss, and my strongest supporter when I made the decision to join the school debating team. My initial reaction upon Kayla's arrival was one of happiness for my dad. I wanted him to be happy, and he deserved to find love once more. When they first met at a friend's cookout, Dad fell in love right away. When he got home that evening, he spoke about Kayla's intelligence, humor, and how her giggle made the whole place smile. It had been years since I'd seen him that enthused about someone. When I initially met Kayla, she appeared like a decent enough person. When my dad was around, she would always ask me about my interests and academic progress. She even bought me a lovely journal as a considerate gift because I had mentioned that I like writing. But I soon saw that when it was just the two of us, her attitude totally altered. Approximately 1 month had passed since their first incident. Kayla and I were the only ones in the house as Dad had run to the shop to get some things for dinner. I made an effort to strike up a discussion by inquiring about her work as a real estate agent. She answered everything with one word until she finally snapped, "Look, I'm only here for your dad." She hardly even looked up from her phone. "You don't have to be my friend." I was startled into quietness. After that, her hypocritical actions were increasingly apparent. Whenever my dad was home, she would pretend to be really interested in my life. She would inquire about my extracurricular activities, friends, and academics, but she would immediately return to ignoring me or muttering hurtful things under her breath as soon as he departed for work. One particularly painful experience occurred when I was 16 years old. Dad had invited several of my best friends over for a modest party. When her father was around, Kayla insisted on making the cake and was quite enthusiastic about it. However, I heard her lamenting over how she had to waste on a buddy over the phone the morning of my birthday. Her day spent serving a sweet 16 brat. It was as though I had taken a punch to the gut. I often considered alerting my dad about Kayla's actions. On some evenings, I would lay in bed and mentally construct talks. But every time I felt like raising my voice, I would think back to how content my dad appeared. The way, when he spoke of Kayla, his eyes brightened. How he had returned to singing in the shower. Something he hadn't done since his mother's passing. I didn't want to be the cause of the unsuccessful outcome. So when my dad wasn't there, I tried to avoid Kayla as much as possible and kept my mouth shut. Kayla became more and more of a part of our lives as the months passed. She began to frequent our home more frequently and left her belongings everywhere. Dad even mentioned the possibility of her moving in full time. My stomach turned at the prospect, but I forced a grin and said I was okay with it. For my father's sake, I persuaded myself I could handle it. On the day of their wedding last week, things reached a breaking point. I was taken aback when Kayla asked me to be a bridesmaid, considering how strongly she felt about me. But for the sake of my dad, I consented to do it. I even contributed to part of the wedding preparations by making recommendations for decor and music. When Dad was around, Kayla would look grateful, but the moment he left the room, she would roll her eyes and disregard everything I'd recommended. I assisted the other bridesmaids in getting ready in the bridal suite on the morning of the wedding. About 1 hour before the ceremony was scheduled to start, Kayla grabbed me aside. I reasoned that she could need assistance with her veil or something. She gave me a shocking revelation. Kayla informed me that she genuinely wanted for me to not participate in the wedding celebration or even be there during the ceremony. She clarified everything for me in brutal detail when I initially thought there might have been a mistake. I was in an automobile accident a few months ago. I was going home after debate team practice when I was hit by a car that had run a red light. Although I was fortunate to live, my face and arms bear some very severe scars. Since they're still healing, they're still very obvious. Kayla said that her wedding pictures will be ruined by my scars. She expressed her want to avoid being reminded of my deformity when she viewed the photos years later. Disfigured is the exact word that she used. She claimed that she had only asked me to be a bridesmaid in order to please my dad, but that she had since realized her error. I was in complete shock. Although I was aware that Kayla didn't like me, I never thought she would go to such lengths as to refuse me a ticket to my own father's wedding due to the way I looked. That moment was when something inside of me broke. Everything that I had been suppressing for years, including hurt and rage, suddenly surfaced. I reflected on all the occasions when I had bit my tongue, all the crude remarks I had ignored, and all the phony grins I had put on for my father. And for what purpose? I mean, how could this woman tell me I'm too ugly to be in her presence on her wedding day? I stormed out of the bridal suite, not even thinking. Kayla was calling for me, evidently recognizing she had overreached herself. However, I continued. Searching for my dad, I sprinted around the arena, mascara running down my cheeks. In a side room, I discovered him fiddling with his tie in the mirror. I suddenly interrupted, and he turned, his expression showing alarm right away. "What's wrong, honey?" With a reach for me, he asked. Subsequently, everything simply poured out. I filled him in on everything, all of Kayla's deceitful actions, including the years she had been treating me behind his back, and this last, cruel attempt to prevent me from attending the wedding due to my wounds. I was crying so much that I was having trouble speaking. However, once I got going, I couldn't stop. My father listened in stunned silence, his expression getting gloomier with every new detail. When I was completely done, he hugged me tightly. He said in a low, emotional voice, "I'm so sorry, I was completely ignorant. I'm such a fool, God." The following events are a little hazy. To the surprise of the guests who had begun to arrive, my dad abruptly canceled the wedding. Kayla was warned to go and not to return by him. There was a great deal of sobbing and shouting, primarily from Kayla's relatives. I was numb and just sat in a corner. Following the incident, Kayla has been telling everyone who will listen that me being a jealous brat who made up things to ruin her great day. I'm a lying, manipulating brat. I've been the target of abuse and derogatory remarks on social media from some of her relatives and friends. If they don't stop, my dad is enraged and is threatening to take legal action. Though I knew I should have addressed Kayla's behavior well in advance of the wedding, I honestly believed that being silent and not stirring up trouble was the right course of action. I feel bad now for causing all this turmoil and blowing up their relationship at the last minute. However, I'm also relieved that my dad is now aware of the reality. I mean, Reddit, AITA, destroying my stepmom's wedding to my dad by exposing her. Should I have accepted it and allowed her to keep me out of the ceremony? I'm not sure if I made the proper decision or not. Update 1. About 2 weeks have passed since the wedding fiasco, and to say things have been crazy would be an understatement. I want to start by saying thank you to everyone who left encouraging comments on my initial post. I was able to recognize that I wasn't incorrect to speak up after reading through them. A few days after all of this, my dad and I had a very long and emotional conversation. We sat outside on our back porch, which is where our early, tender moments together took place. Dad began by expressing his sincere regret for not noticing and for placing me in a situation where I felt unable to reach him. He had such a shattered, guilty look. He started to cry as he was speaking, something I hadn't seen him do since Mom's burial. I was so preoccupied with my own delight and the prospect of having a full family once more that I failed to notice what was going on in front of me. "I failed you, baby, and I will never forgive myself for that," he continued, his voice shaking. I tried telling him that he wasn't to blame, that Kayla's behavior had tricked us both. He shook his head, though, saying that he ought to have been more perceptive and sensitive to my emotions as my parent. He informed me that he would choose me over anybody else, and that I am the most significant person in his life. Not a single question was raised. Hearing that was incredibly relieving and took away a lot of the guilt I had been experiencing. We spent hours discussing the events of the previous 3 years and everything I had bottled up. Dad paid close attention, asking probing questions, and voicing his surprise and indignation at some of Kayla's most heinous deeds. He expressed great distress over the event that happened on my 16th birthday, remarking that he had noticed my quiet and reclusive demeanor that day, but had dismissed it as normal teenage irritability. I felt as though a burden was being lifted off my shoulders as we conversed. I had been carrying this hidden weight for a very long time, attempting to keep my dad happy at the price of my own happiness. Letting it out at last felt liberated. However, after the wedding, Kayla has gone completely insane. She has been updating her social media accounts constantly, manipulating the narrative to paint herself as the victim. She claims in her posts that I am a cunning, malicious little bitch who has been planning to ruin her relationship with my dad from the beginning. She says that since I was envious and didn't want to share my dad's attention, I made up falsehoods about how she treated me. The worst thing is that she has been making fun of my appearance in pictures of me taken both before and after my injury. With comments like, "No wonder she didn't want me to have a picture-perfect wedding, and would you want this monster in your family photos?" She shared side-by-side shots of herself. It felt like a kick to the stomach to see those posts. Since the accident, I've had a lot of trouble with my self-image, and Kayla's hurtful remarks made all of my fears come flooding back. When my dad learned about the posts, he lost it. Without delay, he called Kayla and angrily confronted her, threatening to take legal action if she didn't remove everything and stop bugging me. He never seemed so irate to me. He was yelling into the phone, literally shaking with wrath. Kayla really had the audacity to phone me immediately after, yelling and swearing at me for telling my dad too much. She called me every moniker known to man, claiming that she would make me pay since I had ruined her life. With shaking hands, I hung up and blocked her number. Additionally, Kayla's friends and family have been harassing her online more and more. I've started receiving hateful remarks and mails that call me all kinds of horrible names. In an attempt to destroy the reputation of my dad's business, some people have even started posting bad reviews on his business page. We've gone under a lot of stress together. When some of Kayla's cousins confronted me one day at my school, things got much worse. In the parking lot following argument practice, they cornered me, shouting and causing a commotion. Fortunately, my debate coach noticed what was going on and stopped it before it got physical. In the end, the administrator called the police, and Kayla's relatives were let off the school grounds. In the end, my dad hired a lawyer to write cease and desist letters to Kayla and all other harassers of mine. In addition, he is considering filing for a restraining order against Kayla. I truly appreciate how serious he is about it and how hard he is working to keep me safe. I've been dealing with nervousness and having problems falling asleep during all of this. It has truly taken a toll on Kayla, what with the ongoing internet bullying and her family's continual worry about their whereabouts. I can't stop having nightmares about the wedding day and constantly going back to the bridal suite. I've been slipping in my grades and isolating myself from my pals. I'm thinking of talking to a counselor like my dad suggested. I'm attempting to avoid social media for the time being and surround myself with encouraging friends and family instead. My debate team has been incredible. They have supported and rallied around me. They even planned a small self-care evening for me, complete with corny movies and face masks. Even though I know everything will pass, it still feels like I'm in the midst of a hurricane right now. Despite Kayla's best efforts to portray me as the bad guy, all I can do is attempt to take things day by day and keep reminding myself that I made the correct decision by being honest. All I want is to look in the mirror one day and see the strong, resilient person my dad tells me I've become, instead of the monster Kayla says I am. Update no. 2. Thankfully, a lot has settled down since my last update, which was approximately a month and a half ago. Our lawyer's cease and desist letters appear to be effective. At last, Kayla and her friends have ceased bothering me both personally and virtually. Being free of the need to peer over my shoulder or be concerned about the hurtful remark I could read next has been such a relief. To unwind after all the stress, my dad and I made the decision to go on a brief vacation. At this lovely lakefront cabin, we just hiked, fished, and enjoyed the outdoors for a week. It was just what each of us needed. The cabin had a rustic feel to it. Just books, board games, and each other's company, no TV or Wi-Fi. I was concerned about being so cut off at first, but it turned out to be rather invigorating. We settled into a simple routine. We would get up early and have a hearty breakfast as a group. After enjoying Dad's incomparable pancakes, go for a trek or a fishing excursion. We used to spend our evenings sitting on the dock, taking in the sunset while conversing about anything and nothing at all. My dad confided in me about his relationship with Kayla in a way he had never done before one evening when we were roasting marshmallows over the campfire. He acknowledged that he had disregarded warning signs since he was so anxious to be with someone. Staring into the flames, he replied, "After your mom died, I was lost. It seemed like I was merely going through the motions of life for years. It felt like I was waking up again when I met Kayla. I believe I missed a lot of things because I was so eager to feel something, anything." He continued by talking about a few instances that had made him uncomfortable, including when Kayla had treated weight workers badly or made disparaging remarks about his friends. However, he had consistently justified it by reminding himself that nobody was flawless and that these were little costs associated with happiness. He said, "I felt bad about being happy, like I was betraying your mom's memory. That, I believe, is in part the reason I held onto Kayla's connection so tightly, even in the face of unease. I was attempting to convince myself that it was acceptable to go on." Hearing my dad be so open and sincere was quite moving. I became aware that I hadn't given enough thought to how complicated the situation must have been for him because of my own hurt and resentment against Kayla. It made sense to me somewhat, but it didn't justify his ignorance of her treatment of me. For the first time in a long time, we also discussed my mother. Mom had rarely been mentioned before, and when she was, it was generally with a hint of regret. However, my father told me some previously unheard tales about her that evening. He related their first date to me, where the mother had spilt wine all over herself and the father had covered the stain by giving her his jacket. He described how he used to adore and get annoyed at her off-key singing every morning in the shower. We took along some old photo albums to look through as we chatted. I had never seen some of the photographs before. My parents on their wedding day, my mother while she was expecting me, and the three of us in the hospital shortly after my birth. I felt a connection to my mother that I hadn't felt in a long time after looking at those pictures and realizing how content and full of life she was. While we were looking through the albums, my dad started to cry. He squeezed my hand and whispered, "Your mom would be so proud of the young woman you've become like you. She had such a strong sense of justice. She would never have tolerated Kayla's treatment of you." To me, those words had immense meaning. I had felt so far apart from my mother's recollection. That gap was somewhat closed when my dad told me that Mom would be proud of me. Upon returning from our trip, I was taken aback to discover a letter waiting for me. I had only met Megan, 19F, a few times, but she was Kayla's daughter. Megan expressed regret in the letter for keeping her silence about her mother's actions longer. She claimed to have seen Kayla treat me behind my dad's back and felt terrible about herself for keeping quiet about it. Megan continued by revealing that Kayla had been deceitful and cunning in a similar way during her own upbringing. She talked of having to tread carefully around her mom's mood swings and never knowing which Kayla would show up on any given day. I felt both pain and validation as I read her words. I was saddened that Megan had to grow up with that toxicity, but I also felt validated that I wasn't insane or making things up. She related a particularly upsetting recollection from when she was 13. Although Kayla had promised to throw her a lavish party, she abruptly changed her mind and said she would much rather take her pals on a weekend getaway. She didn't even phone to wish Megan a happy birthday, rather. She left her by herself with a frozen pizza. Reading about how Kayla had consistently failed her own daughter was sad. Megan wrote in her letter that she was going to stop talking to her mother and concentrate on getting better. She expressed her wish that we could get coffee and chat later, once we've had time to comprehend everything. Though I'm not sure if I'm ready for that just yet, I was grateful that she got in touch. All in all, I feel a lot more at ease these days. Now that the ordeal with Kayla is over, I can finally move on and concentrate on finishing my senior year of high school. I'm really excited about starting to volunteer at the neighborhood animal shelter with my dad. After all the negativity, it feels fantastic to have a project we can work on together and something constructive to concentrate on. Additionally, I've been considering my future a lot lately. I had my heart set on attending the state school here, but after all of this, I'm thinking of applying to several out-of-state universities. There's something alluring about starting over somewhere new. My dad has been incredibly helpful, assisting me with my school research and even suggesting that I visit certain colleges in the spring. My scars are gradually but definitely going away. My doctor suggested this scar therapy cream, and I've been using it, and it seems to be working. More significantly, I'm trying to accept them as a current aspect of who I am. They serve as a reminder of the emotional and physical hardships I've faced. While not flawless, life is generally satisfactory. Even while I know there will likely be more difficulties ahead, I feel more resilient and equipped to handle them. I'm appreciative of my father, my real friends who have supported me through everything, and the opportunity to begin this new chapter in my life. It's hard to realize the wedding disaster was 6 months ago. A great deal has changed, largely in a positive way. I'm now in the middle of my senior year and working hard on my college applications. My dad has been incredibly helpful in assisting me with my academic research and essay writing. During spring break, we're taking a road trip to some of my top picks. I've been devoting all of my time to my extracurricular activities and coursework. We just won our regional competition, and this year I am the captain of the debate team. It is satisfying to witness the results of my labor and to be able to concentrate on a subject I love. My academic standing has also improved. I'm also a candidate for valedictorian. It was odd to say the least when I ran into Kayla at the grocery store last week. I heard her voice from behind me while I was selecting apples in the produce area. My stomach clenched up right away. She was there when I turned around, and she didn't resemble the polished, put-together woman I had remembered. Kayla appeared awful, with disheveled hair, shabby clothes, and heavy bags under her eyes. I nearly felt sorry for her for a moment. However, she suddenly parted her lips and began to vomit poison, screaming I'd ruined her life and labeling me a home wrecker. The manager of the store had to come over and ask her to leave because she was making such a mess. I turned to leave without saying anything. Afterwards, I learned from a mutual acquaintance that Kayla had lost her job and had been abusing alcohol to cope with her grief. She's apparently been trash-talking my dad and me all around town, but most people don't take her seriously anymore. I can't help but feel pity for her because of the way she treated me, even if it's tragic. Fortunately, I have maintained communication with Megan, Kayla's daughter. We've gone to concerts together last month and had coffee a few times. Finding someone who can relate to how difficult it was to deal with Kayla's toxic conduct has been incredibly pleasant. Megan is currently undergoing therapy to address a great deal of her early trauma. She's brave to be trying to get better. More heartbreaking tales from Megan's childhood about growing up with Kayla were told, such as how Kayla would frequently forget to pick her up from school, leaving Megan to wait for hours, or how she'd make grandiose promises about special trips or family getaways, just to abruptly withdraw. It's evident that Kayla didn't restrict her deceptive actions to our interactions. It was strange at first when my dad started dating again. However, Lisa, his current lover, looks incredibly kind and sincere. She tries to be kind and never attempts to force a mother-daughter relationship on me. After everything with Kayla, it's refreshing. Lisa and my dad became close via their shared experiences of sadness and being single parents when Lisa's spouse passed away from cancer a few years ago. I was somewhat anxious when Lisa came over for dinner for the first time, but she quickly made me feel comfortable by praising my debate team awards and really inquiring about my college goals. She even remembered that my dad had said how much I liked snickerdoodles, so she brought over some handmade cookies. Even though it was so little, the gesture had a big impact. For my part, I feel stronger and more assured than before. My accident scars have healed quite a bit. In fact, I just participated in a picture session for my school's body positivity campaign. It was incredibly moving to see those pictures and realize how far I've come, emotionally and physically. In addition, I've started talking to my friends more candidly about all that transpired with Kayla. I didn't want to burden anyone, so I bottled everything up for a long time. But I'm coming to see that it's acceptable to rely on others and ask for help when I need it. My pals have been really kind and understanding. Considering all that transpired with Kayla, I'm happy that I had the guts to speak up at the appropriate moment. Even though it was difficult and disorganized, in the end, it had a profoundly good impact on my life. I'm eager to start the next chapter of my life after high school and explore what lies ahead. Any challenge I face, I'm confident I can conquer it.